So we have a really wonderful guest today, Takashi Ikegami, who is a professor at the University of Tokyo. Hi, Takashi. How are you doing?
Hi, hi Ken. Yeah,
So
I'm
you
okay.
are
I'm doing
actually,
fine. Yes, thanks.
so you're actually in the office at the university?
Yeah, this is my personal room.
Okay, so my first question to you, Takashi, is what is your favorite equation
What?
of all the equations in the world? What is your favorite equation, Takashi?
That's a very good question, but I've never thought about it. I think one of the most interesting to me was
Yeah,
when I was a student.
yeah.
I happened to read I happened to read the paper by um it's not I happened to, but actually my professor Maso Suzuki
Huh?
uh
He was
gave
a
it.
statistical physics
Yeah,
professor.
yeah, yeah. It's a physics about the spin glass, and then was written by um, you know, Parisi, George Parisi, who got the Nobel Prize like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, right. And his equation was, when you have his equation was he gave a solution to the equation called Sherrington-Kirkpatrick equation, right? Which is
Uh,
a mean field type equations of the spin glass model.
Total spin glass.
And I
Oh,
thought it was very nice. Yeah, I thought it was
oh.
interesting.
That's a really specific equation.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what we people say, replica symmetry breaking. And
Which
each,
is
each spin is interacting with himself. I mean,
and I presume it can be applied to neural networks and so on.
yes, yes. Neural networks and many, evolutionary, possible evolutionary processes and trees and language and everything that is very much complex, to not too easy to solve. Yes.
Well, I should say my favorite is probably Dirac's equation because it's kind of a taking kind of a square root of Schrödinger's equation and
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
breaking.
also my favorite. When I was reading a book by Shinichiro Tomonaga,
Uh,
that equation was introduced like a first 10 pages or something, which was very, very impressive. Yes.
so
So,
the reason why I started our discussion with equations is because we are feeling probably the era of age of equations is probably
mhm.
over because we have cell automatons and that is your specialty as well.
Yeah.
And we have artificial intelligence systems, which behavior cannot be necessarily described in terms of equations. So how
Right.
do you feel about this, new trend in science?
Well, actually, this one was when I went to Los Alamos in 1989.
Hmm?
And people are struggling to compute Navier-Stokes equations, right?
Okay.
And then they're using cell automata because it was computationally very effective,
Uh-huh.
but turbulence was never get simulated, and they look into the cell automata algorithm and try to understand why they cannot make it, and
Hmm?
then they found that they need at least like a 27 symmetry. And then cell automata with four neighbors, like Moore neighbors, it's not possible to have a
Oh, I see.
27
That's
symmetry.
interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, so the equations, the equation written in a continuous state requires some sort of a symmetry, which also requires in cell automata. So I thought it was very interesting. And after they introduced some high symmetry cell automata in the 3D space, then they could simulate Navier-Stokes equation on the turbulent state. So turbulent state is in a cell automata requires some high dimensional symmetry, which I thought was very interesting because it's a hidden nature, right?
That's interesting because in superstring or supermembrane theory, they sometimes refer to higher dimensional space. But what you're
Yeah.
saying is that if you want to have certain kind of symmetry in cellular automata, you've got to have higher dimension space, as a requirement.
Mhm. Yeah, well, because yeah, actually, that reminds me when Richard Feynman came to our institute back in 1987 or six,
Uh-huh.
and then he asked, it's a famous Feynman bomb, right? And then he asked us, like in front of like 100 people, and then say, do you have any questions? Well, any questions in physics? And then I asked him, what happens if you laws of physics are not written in discrete math, but if
you asked
not in continuous state, but discrete math. Yeah. And then his question was, I said, Cell Automata is much more wider description capability than comparing with a continuous state. So I think Cell Automata principles found in Cell Automata might explain better than continuous equations. And he says, well, he also thought in the same directions, but the big problem is that the Lorentz invariance was not recovery capable in
that's
this
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. And so, what was your reaction? I mean, so do you think there's something equivalent to Lorentz invariance in cellular automata? Can you define Lorentz invariance for systems based on cellular automata? What do you think?
Actually, that was my homework.
That was your homework. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And then after 30 years, I still haven't solved the problem. But I don't know whether the cell automata can have such Lorentz, around certain axis, you can have a Lorentz invariance. But this special axis has no meaning in physics space, right? So I'm not sure whether this strange axis, I mean, around this axis that you can have a Lorentz invariance, but this special axis doesn't mean anything in the real space, right? Because we think that space is symmetry, right?
That's interesting, because do you think you can define a cellular automata independent of these special axes? It doesn't seem to be possible,
right.
intuitively. Right. So that's a fundamental problem, isn't it, with cellular automata systems?
That's right. So but since 1987, I forgot to solve this problem.
Right. So, but you have this homework from Richard Feynman, which
yes, that's true.
And you have something from Richard Feynman in your office?
Oh yes.
Can you?
Not here, but in my office. Yes.
Oh, okay. So not there. What do you have actually?
Yeah. So I asked him to sign up my one of those paper, and then he signed his signature, and then also he put Feynman diagram with the electron and the photon. Yeah, I think.
I see. So that what you have said reminds us of the new kind of science book by Wolfram.
Oh yeah.
Not particularly well received, right? I mean, he claimed that the cellular automata is a new kind of science, but people either thought it was too obvious, or he didn't come up with anything fundamentally new. What is your impression of Wolfram's book, a new kind of science?
I mean, well, I think it was very much well accepted, but the question is, it's almost everything is uncomputable, right? Because it's you cannot have analytical solutions, meaning that you cannot predict what happens in the future. Oh. But why the people love equations is because people cannot predict the future. And then if you use cell automata, you cannot predict anything in the future. So it's very accepted, but at the same time that the people, I don't know, it's more like a theoretical, it's theoretically interesting and then, attractive enough, but practically you have to do something else, right? So that's, it's cell automata is fine and it's taken for granted. However, what people require is something that you can predict and then you can play around, with your manually, or intuitively what happens. So cell automata is so difficult that you can use your intuition to understand what's out there, right? So that's a big problem, I think.
So that's quite interesting. And do you think with the Moore's law increasing the number of the computational resources, so to speak, that we can access to, do you think things would change now?
Oh yeah, it's totally, because as you know, like a deep neural network and GPU, that changes our computational world a lot.
Right. So, but another question is, we know that there is this fundamental non-locality in quantum mechanics, like EPR paradox and Bell's inequality. But it seems that in several automata, there's no such, non-locality involved in the fundamental algorithm. So where do you think is the difference? Do you think we can define a non-local quantum mechanics-like version of cellular automata somehow, or?
Yeah, that's also I have been discussing with people. Again, it's 30 years ago that the people want to also implement cellular automata, and then now that we have a quantum computation, right? So that what about the quantum cellular automata?
That's interesting.
Yeah, that should be possible. Yeah.
Um,
But the point is, in a usual cellular automata, each pixel represents I don't know, maybe the states or something, right?
right.
State in a space. Especially the thing that we've been discussing is it's uh, like I think it's before Wolfram, Stuart Kaufman, he's been working with a cellular automata to describe how the genetic code has been evolved, right? And then each pixel corresponds to like it's genome or gene expression,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we don't have to assume that the cellular automata should be like the regular lattice with a 2D or 3D space. It can be, as you said, more non-local interaction with infinite pixels can be assumed at the same time. But I don't know how to do this kind of complexity to do with this kind of complexity. But I take your point. Of course, we can do that.
Yeah. So Takashi, what is your intuition if you have to choose between two models? One that is based on a continuum of space-time and equations, and one which is based on discrete cells and cellular automata algorithm. Which do you think is more closer to reality, actually?
Well, I think to me the reality is always with a continuous space and time. However, in order to check it, we have to run, in a computer. And now that our computer is a discrete system, right? So
Right.
that from the beginning, the system should be discrete, so that it should be accelerated. And then, so our intuition of understanding something, and then whether we can implement it in a computer is different, right?
So how do you feel about this simulation hypothesis that some people are arguing about, that this universe is actually a huge simulation on a computer devised by some artificial intelligence systems and so on?
No, well, actually, I like the idea.
You like the idea?
I'm very much sympathetic with this idea. Yes.
But you said, this reality is a continuum of space-time and.
Yeah, well, actually, our current computer is a discrete system. That's why. But maybe aliens can invent like another computer, which can be different, right?
So you're saying that it is possible to simulate physical entities on a continuum of space-time described by equations. If we know how to build such a computer, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So that should be actually the ultimate goal of quantum computing. If that's
well, now that the quantum computer is that the people picking up one of the quantum system. I mean, everything is quantum, of course, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the material or the system that people can easily make input and output, so that you can simulate something which is already simulated by the material. That's my kind of interpretation. Yeah.
By the way, to change the subject a bit,
yes, please.
I understand you are an artist, right? What kind of art have you been making? I know, but for the benefit of the audience, can you?
Well, actually, so for the I haven't spontaneously want to make art, but one of my artist colleague, Keiichiro Shibuya, I met him when I visited actually you at the CSL.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah.
Right, and then we decided to do something new kind of sound art. So usually the sound is like you have like notes note on the, and then you play that. Even if with a piano or violin or anything, that you can use the same score right in front of you. However, if you play the same note by the piano or violin, that you have a different sound, because each sound has what we call timbre. Timbre is like
Yeah.
including like the sound generated by the device, and device has its own sound, right? In a power spectrum that you have like right, I mean distribution around the notes, the shaft spectrum, right? So that the people listen to not only note but sound of reflection of came from the music instruments. So I try to use my algorithm to generate different kinds of sound files from my algorithm, and then it's like a sound file, but the people take it as a note, so that the Keiichiro puts those notes on the score, so that the sound is now it's not composed of the notes, but it's composed of sound files, complex.
Yeah, that's interesting. And oh, something wrong with your connection, I think. Can you hear
We
me?
call a field machine. It's a three-dimensional that you can, right? I think. Yeah.
So you remember this conference that we had on in CCA in
Yeah.
Kitagawa, and John Cassidy had a trouble. He of course he's the author of the Cambridge Quintet. He gave a talk about science and art, and all the artists became really angry because they feel that art cannot be explained away by this kind of science. And so you are a scientist and you are also an artist. So how do you strike a balance between science and art? Because it can be sometimes difficult, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, actually, when we say sound art, is that it's not all. It's not something like I made a very complicated picture by chaos dynamics and bring it to Earth, which I don't think it's a sound art. Sound art is more like something that you cannot publish in science journals, but the phenomena itself is very interesting, so that the people want to use it as an art piece. That's one of the example that I think expression of a scientific discovery is not on the science stage itself. You really have to expand the stage of science into different disciplines, and art is obviously that's one of the most interesting and important stages that we can expand science from its own stage.
Many scientists actually try to explain art in terms of science. But you that's not what you like to do, right? I mean,
actually, I'm never interested in doing that kind of thing.
Right. But on the other hand, sometimes artists say when scientists try to do art, they tend to say, well, art can be made only by humans and so on. And so this because I'm doing this because there are now arts produced by artificial intelligence and RE2 and stable diffusion and so on. What are your impressions of these efforts?
Well, first of all, I thought it was very nice because it's so fun, and then you can also use stable diffusion to make interesting, illustrations and attractive, very lovely things, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't call it art. I mean, well, you can be an artist using a stable diffusion, but why you call it, artist or art?
Well, what is it? So there's this interesting, maybe Turing test type argument. So how can you distinguish art from non-art in principle? So, some people might say that, well, stable diffusion is producing art, and you're saying that they are not producing art. So what's the difference?
So I have a very strict definition of art.
Okay.
Yeah. So if the author says, okay, this is art, if I say, okay, this is art, then it becomes art, right? So that we are pretty much depending on what the author insists in front of his work. And then if AI cannot say anything, whether this one can be called art or not, with his own confidence, then I don't believe that can become art, right?
Also, it all depends on the intention of
Yeah,
the system
yeah.
or agent, if you like. And
That is what I mean. Yes.
so, for example, I have this journeying question. Do you regard Bitcoin as a kind of art, or
Mm.
because
That's interesting. But the according to my definition, there is no author of Bitcoin, as an art piece. Then we cannot call it art. But you can call it art, but there's no author that insists that Bitcoin is exactly an art. That we cannot call it art, right? It's pretty much depending on the author who made the Bitcoin or who made that things.
so if Satoshi Nakamoto
Yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting you to say.
intended it as an art form,
Then
then,
becomes art, of course.
okay. So because I'm reminded of the social sculpture concept by Joseph Beuys,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that art is a means to change society,
Mm-hmm.
human conditions in general, and Bitcoin or blockchain in general did change
Yeah,
where we perceive society, right? So
yeah.
I was wondering if that wouldn't qualify as art in your perspective.
Also, yeah, I like Joseph Beuys, and Joseph Beuys himself is an art form, art style. I mean,
Uh-huh.
but so yeah, so the human can also be an art, right? Because some of like you know Prime Minister Abe, Shuzo Abe, was shot by a man, right?
Uh-huh.
And that event also changes the society and then concept of how the politics can be independent from a certain type of religious activity is becomes a huge event in Japanese society, right? But do you call it art? I don't think this is an art. Well, you can call it art, but it doesn't change the way that we behave, right? And if we don't change our behavior, then whether you call it art or not doesn't mean anything, to me at least.
So what do you think of you know the so-called ready-made or found art?
Mm-hmm. That's a very beautiful example, and I think that's people. I mean, especially like what also Campbell Can was yeah. So these arts, the ready-made art, it's of course in the author's intention was try to make art by from those ready-made things. That's exactly what I can call it art, right? That's the definition of art, I think.
Yeah, so he has a sound machine, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a mass production thing.
Yeah.
But so I'm just curious because I, I was kind of surprised that you kind of associate art with the intention of the producer. That's
Mm-hmm.
quite interesting. So, but of course, the producer of the sound machine didn't intend this to be an artwork, right?
No.
But somebody might produce this kind of thing as a kind of artwork, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
in your opinion, what is the difference between so you can make this sounds. This
Mm-hmm.
is not art, but somebody might actually claim that this is art, and
Mm-hmm.
so because you're an artist, so what is the difference between a state of mind where you produce art and
Mm-hmm.
in which you don't produce art? What is the difference, do you think? Because
Yeah, if you have to explain your work by a language, I
uh,
mean, if you really have to explain what's out there in front of the people that are come to see your work,
yeah.
then if you need more words, then it doesn't become art. Art is something like a
Oh,
phenomenon that doesn't require any language to be
that,
explained.
that's interesting. So, for example, Marcel Duchamp, when
Mm,
he walks into a men's toilet and he sees a urinal, he wouldn't probably see it as an art form but
no, no.
when you want to ask what the function of this thing is,
Hmm.
of course you try to explain in
Hmm.
terms of its function in daily life. But
Right.
what you're saying is that art doesn't need any explanation.
No.
It's just there.
Yeah. But no, what I'm saying is that if you have to explain why this is art, then if you require explanation to it, then the system doesn't become art, right? Art doesn't require any explanation, but the explanation should be there inherently in the art object itself. Like Duchamp, for example, like he bring that toilet to one of the different places right, and
Yeah.
not in the toilet room. Then out of frame of reference is also already indexing. That's an art, right? Art
Mm.
is also breaking like frames, and then that also the intention was how he can a little bit perturbating the context of the object itself. That also becomes art, right? So art requires the hidden intention of the author who made that object. That's why I think it's simply different from the toilet in the same place that people usually use the toilet.
Right.
Right?
So,
I mean,
Takashi, do you believe in God?
why? What?
Do you
Um,
believe in God? Do you think? Do you believe God exists, or?
yeah. Well, actually, if you believe in initial state, that explains why this becomes like this and this, then the initial configuration becomes God. In that sense, I can say I can talk about the
Mm.
God, but except initial configuration that I don't think I can explain what is God.
Because earlier you said that you are sympathetic with the simulation hypothesis.
Yeah.
So when you say that, there should be some entity or agent that started the simulation that is this universe, right? So do you call that God or something else?
Mm. I don't have the answer to that. Yeah, I still don't have the answer to this, but I mean, there are something that you cannot explain simply by the cause and effect, right? So
Yeah.
even if we are simulated by and our university is simulated, but
Mm.
we don't say that there's somebody that is simulating our universe, right?
Right.
No.
So because you have been saying that the intention of the creator is determines whether something is art or not. And
Mm.
do you think the whole universe is an art or not? I mean, do you think the creator, whether you call it,
Well, that's why I see now.
I
Now
mean,
I
yeah,
understand the direction of your.
yeah. I mean, so do you think this is art or what is this? What is all this? I mean, this whole universe.
At least what I can say is that we can find patterns, like the beginning of our talk, that there is equations that seems like we can describe and predict the universe. So
Right.
that it's not the universe is not like just a random something, right? It
Hmm.
has a patterns that can be described by the equations and language. So yeah, maybe you can call it art. But the question is, as I said, the definition of art is that the author's intention
Hmm.
claims that is this one is art. This one is art, and then I don't hear anything from the God that saying that this universe is art, right? So that I don't know whether we can call it art or not.
Right. And I think you agree when I say that maybe the difference between science and religion is probably whether there's a system of doubting itself and upgrading and the so-called falsifiability, right?
Mm.
And so do you sometimes doubt your own ideas and your own value systems?
I
Because
do. I
otherwise,
do a lot. I
yeah,
do a
because
lot.
otherwise it would become religion, right? And some
Mm.
scientists do behave like they are religious, they believe in some values. And so do you
Yeah,
sometimes doubt yourself?
I do a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I intend. Yeah, my intention is. Sometimes I really think that we really have to uh go outside of my frame
Mhm.
because like Rolf Pfeiffer, our a mutual friend
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he's a robotist, and he's always saying that when we make a robot, we are in the frame of reference is a big problem, And then, well, the robot can make a coffee, but he cannot drive a car at the same time, because you can make a robot at certain frame of reference, but you cannot do it, I mean, outside of the reference. But why not just a robot, but ourselves also in certain type of frame of reference, right? So if you caged in this frame of reference, the thing that we have to do is what happens if we can get out of these frames and then see what we are objectively. I think that's what you have been saying. Like my image is that Ken Mogi has been saying, tackling this frame of reference in many different contexts. That's why I think your activity is very variable.
Yeah, I mean, so we're probably coming to this very important question of whether large language models can be considered intelligent. I have seen many discussions, and some people are saying that it's all fake. I mean, GPT-3 and ChatGPT,
yeah,
they are not really intelligent. And what do you think of these large language models so far?
Yeah. So my honest feeling is that they already has something in it, because when I'm discussing with them, they surprise me, right?
You do discuss with them.
Yes, I do discuss. Yes.
What kind of things do you discuss with ChatGPT?
So I discussed with GPT-3 about because it's in one of the performance that I did in Okinawa. So I asked him about ice line, so different types of ice forms, and then whether they are a transition from ice 3 to ice line. But also, I was discussing with the GPT-3, and also I asked him, what do you mean by understanding something? And then, because I tried to let him discuss what GPT-3 thinks about what is embodiment, and then do we need an embodiment to understand something? And then I think embodiment is necessary for us, and then also for robots. Why the people are making robots is because try to understand what do you mean by understanding something, right? Just knowledge doesn't explain why we can understand something.
Right. So, and what did GPT-3 say?
Yes. I was expecting that you are going to ask me that kind of question.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
but actually, they didn't answer to that question directly. And they say, "Oh, that's a very good question." And then he said, "We need a quantum computer to calculate what does it mean by understanding something." So maybe
Did you say that? Oh,
yes.
that's interesting. So you are a university professor. So do you have concerns that academics around the world are having that students would cheat on term papers, and because they can hand in something written by GPT-3 and pretend that they have written it.
Well, actually, my honest feeling is that if you can very nicely use GPT-3 to write up the report and then can explain something, then that GPT-3 is already a part of his brain, right? His intelligence. So we don't say, okay, you really have to use your own brain to explain something, which is stupid, don't you think so? I mean, GPT-3 is already his part of his intelligence, right? So okay, so you always have to carry GPT-3 with you. Then that becomes your own intelligence. So I think it's okay.
What do you think of this idea of prompt engineering? I've come across this term, and in which you try to induce the GPT-3 to come up with appropriate output by putting appropriate prompt to it. What do you hear? What did the idea?
Yeah, that's also it's a valuable questions, because it's a prompt engineering to GPT-3 is giving him initial configurations to what kind of a conversation that he has to bring up, right? But the question is, so that I think prompt engineering is very important to let him arrive. However, at the same time, the GPT-3 cannot get out of this frame, to forget all these prompts, and then he starts new kind of conversation, with respective to the initial prompt. That is necessary, but I don't think they can do it. They really have to carry on those prompt and then see. But of course, you can put them forget like 5 sentences ago, or you can just talk randomly without referring to any context. But the human conversation is in between, so that's another big issue, I think.
Yeah. Do you think GPT-3 is conscious?
Well, I think, yeah. Well, my answer is, well, yes and no. Sometimes, within the conversation, I must confess that I feel that they are conscious, but getting out of this conversation and then see how the GPT-3 is interacting with each other. And I think, well, they may not be conscious because they don't understand. I mean, they too much concentrated on the same issue forever and ever, right? Human get tired of discussing the same thing and switching from one to the other, and that's also the hint of creativity for the human beings. Right. So they are not so much creative in the sense that they don't understand what they are talking about and then still talking about in the same frames forever and ever, right? So that's why.
So do you think GPT-3 or ChatGPT has passed the Turing test? Do you think?
I think GPT-3 can pass the Turing test, yes.
You think so? So do you think Turing test is still valid in terms of detecting intelligence, real, genuine intelligence?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, my answer to that difficult question is I think we really have to revise the Turing test.
Oh, you have to. In what ways? I mean, this is interesting because
Yeah, we have to revise the Turing test in the sense that whether we can switch from one context, one frame of reference to other frames, spontaneously. That is a necessary requirement for the program to satisfy at the same time. Maybe let's see. Yeah, but it's a bit cheating. Well, whether we can talk about something that is what we are sharing at the same time, with the GPT-3, while we are discussing something, right? Because for example, like something that is becomes some current knowledge or something like the blue car is passing through in front of us, and whether we can talk about this is of course that can be very much like a strong Turing test, but I don't think they can you can pass the test even if they have a camera, and then we see like beautiful woman is walking in front of us, and then if we say something, but GPT-3 never refer to this kind of phenomena because they don't understand why do we have to talk about this beautiful woman passing in front of us, right? Because they cannot choose the topic from scratch. So
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that you were saying in our earlier conversations was that GPT-3 doesn't have a desire.
No.
It has no biology, and so
yeah.
So what do you think of the people who use GPT-3 or ChatGPT for dating applications? I mean, dating app. I mean, they try to date somebody by cut and paste of GPT output, and
well, that I think it's an extremely creative idea.
yeah,
I like it.
okay. Yeah, so I mean, so this updating of the Turing test idea is probably on many people's mind. And do you have any? So you said maybe changing the subject might be a great, but probably we can engineer it into large language models, right? So what do you think of the so-called artificial AI effect in general? The tendency of people to regard something that is achieved by AI to be something beneath the AGI, artificial general intelligence, because it happened to chess, shogi, Go, and so on. So are we cheating on the artificial intelligence systems? Because no matter what they achieve, we are saying, oh, that's not enough. We are always raising the bar, so to speak. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, yeah. Rodney Brooks, that's also a common friend, and then he said he wrote a paper that the elephant doesn't play chess, right?
okay.
So the elephant doesn't play chess. So the things that we think as an index of intelligence is something too much specific, or too much artificial in a way that it doesn't something to do with our survivability or anything, right? It's just like a little, puzzle that people, wanted to.
What is intelligence actually?
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that we have to discuss. What is intelligence, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there is something that we can do without any, any training, or without any like consciously training something, but like walking around, or bicycling, or swimming. All this kind of stuff is something that is so difficult for the robots to do, but still we can do it without any difficulty. But can we call it intelligence? Of course, some people call it intelligence, but some people call it, oh, it doesn't intelligence. It's just about the embodiment, right? So I think a boundary between intelligence and non-intelligence is very fragile, and it's pretty much depending on who studies that phenomenon, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you are a professor at the University of Tokyo, and University of Tokyo is arguably one of the centers of excellence in Japan or in the world. And do you feel a change in the mindset of students because of the advent of artificial intelligence systems? The way we regard some people to be intelligent might be changing because, one, we don't require people to be have huge memory capacities anymore, because that can be done by computers. And two, we don't require people to be good at calculations, because that's done by computers. So what do you look for in a student nowadays? I mean, if you want him or her to be intelligent, I mean, is
Yeah.
there...
Well, to that question, I have a clear answer to that.
Okay.
So, yeah, because I have been thinking of it for like these days, and then I think human intelligence is like this level, right? But
Oh.
with the using like a GPT chat or anything, that you can go this level, right?
Oh.
So bridging the gap between this level and this level is only possible, can be possible by using GPT chat, or these GPT-3, all
Right.
these LLMs, right? So I think what I require people, I mean students, to learn is, okay, take it for granted that we can use GPT-3, and then based on that, what we can do, right? Like we have a computer. I mean, nobody says these days, okay, your research is cheating because you're using computer. This
Hmm.
sounds very strange, right?
Right.
What?
Right.
I mean, of course I'm using computer. Do you think it's
Okay.
cheating?
Yeah.
Like, so for like within like a few years, that the people say, okay, you're cheating because you're using. Now that people say, okay, because you're using GPT-3, your programming is cheating because GPT-3 told you how
Hmm.
to write, right?
All right.
But within 3 years, maybe that people say, okay, of course we are using GPT-3, and how we can go beyond that, right? How we can make a new kind of program or a new kind of theory based on that. So that's what we call intelligence, and that's what is required for the University of Tokyo students to learn when you come to the uni, I think.
That's interesting. And some people are discussing how we can replace the search engine with systems based on large language models. And
Yeah.
I've read an article that Microsoft is trying to catch up with and overcome Google by combining GPT-3 and ChatGPT with Bing, their own search engine. And what do you think is the future of search engines?
Uh-huh.
Because when, for example, when you ask GPT-3 about embodiment and intelligence, earlier we would have searched each paper and entries individually and kind of synthesized within a mind what the relationship between embodiment and intelligence is. But in a way, what you've got with GPT-N is the result of statistical ensemble, if you like, of what people have written about it on the
right.
So it's kind of an integrated search engine, isn't it? So what do you think is a future of search engines?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So if there's a set of the words or knowledge that GPT-3 can collect from the internet, right?
Yeah.
And then how you can search outside of this search engine is something that is required. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's
No.
possible. But
What do you think about that?
I don't know. Maybe the people try to limit the language set that GPT-3 can learn, so that you have a GPT-3 physicist, GPT-3 chemist, and then of course you can learn physics and chemistry at the same time. But of course there's a limit of computational capability and anything. But maybe the search engine. Yeah, well, there's something interesting. I mean, I think you are implying something like that. But maybe the search engine, the definition of search engine itself should be, updated, because searching is not just searching the concept or something, but searching for something that it hasn't been discovered yet in the world is I think the true meaning of searching engine, right? Yeah. The search engine is something that is like some people want to go to like European countries, Asia, to discover himself, right? So searching means in very much like in a general sense that maybe there are some possibility that we can expand. The search engine can be more generic and then more interesting. But
yeah, I think people around the world who are working at the universities, university professors and so on, are wondering, in the age when companies like DeepMind and OpenAI and Microsoft and so on, Google, are putting so much money into artificial intelligence research. What would be the role, function of universities? I think this is something that is on the mind of many professors across the globe. And do you have any idea, what is the function of universities who necessarily do not have that much money, like Google, or OpenAI and so on? So.
Yeah, well, that's also a very interesting question. I remember when I was in University of Kobe University, I went to one day I found some very interesting book on the library, and then I want to rent it, and then I went to the library and I tried to say, okay, I want to rent this book, but the librarian said, okay, but now this is rented by somebody, and then can I just use it for one day to check something? And then she said, no, of course not, because this is high confidential that who rent this book.
Oh, okay.
So what? And then also there's a bunch of secret. I mean, who reads the book, and then whether you can find some of the very important, the materials in the world is his professional of the professor, right? Yeah. Which I think is bullshit. So, but after making about everything, right, that we know, the one very miserable prediction is that the professors can teach students how to use those devices and knowledges and computer tools, which was something like English conversation. I mean, like also how to use Windows. That was like a 50 I think it was 20 years ago that the University of Tokyo itself decided that the fresh students have to learn English conversation, and then how to use computer, how to use the internet becomes like what do you call it? Like that's one of the basic tools the adults should learn. But I thought it was stupid. Something from my memory when I went to the university. maybe like you also have the same experiences, but they didn't teach us what is English basic conversation is,
Right.
or they didn't tell me how to use computer. They started to do with some categorical theory that's behind the computer algorithm, or
Yeah.
some sort of middle age French literature, which very few people can read it. So
Right.
something useless is what we have to learn from the university.
I
The
see.
university is, the computer or the AI that some people are now using it becomes more like a common knowledge for everybody to learn to, raise its basic level, right? But at the university, what we have to learn is something that is very much strongly useless for your social life. That's I think is function of university. That's some sort of anti-common knowledge, anti-common life, everyday life something.
I
Yeah,
totally agree. And, I am a great fan of the Rex Friedman podcast. And,
yeah.
one of the best guests that I appreciated was Joshua
Mm-hmm.
Bach. Maybe you've seen the episode. And Joshua Bach once said to Rex Friedman that, if we can make artificial general intelligence with the current trend of research, then Joshua Bach himself doesn't have to do it because somebody else would do it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what you have just said about usefulness reminded me of that, because if somebody with a lot of money can do something, with the present trend of technology or
Mm-hmm.
science, then universities do not have to do that because
Right, that's
they
right.
don't do it anymore, right? Anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so do you feel there are still alternative ways to uh, study intelligence or consciousness different from the way it is done in artificial intelligence research right now?
Well, that's a very intelligent question. I think well, I must say I do. I mean, that's what we do have to do at the university, right? So the current trend is of course it's led by the commercial, I mean,
Yeah,
money, and
yeah,
then already established value, right? I mean, if people want to become rich, right, by a rich car and gorgeous houses, and those kind of values should be should be changed. Really have to prepare alternative currency or alternative value systems.
mhm,
Those are what university can only university can produce, I think, because it's anti current trends, and then I think um especially when we have the things that what I think is for example, like adaptation, the concept of adaptation is, of course, it's related to intelligence, but what I say in adaptation is not adapted to the current situation, right? So adaptation in the evolutionary process is adapted toward the future, right? Something that happens in the future, then the living systems must adapt to the what happens in the future, not happens at the same now, right?
right,
Therefore, the system can survive in the future, but maybe it's not so effective in the current, I mean, now, but can be effective in the future, right? So what about adaptation to the current, to the future? That's what I think is what I learned from evolutionary systems. So the intelligence is something about the future, and then the intelligence now studied by many people is something is about nowness, right? So what about making some like evolutionary system is well, I think it's one of the main way to study intelligence, but it's been lacking in the current study, I think.
that's quite interesting. And you are an expert on complex systems and deterministic chaos and so on. So there's this famous butterfly effect and so on,
Mm-hmm.
real form of exponent and real form of time and so on. So how you to so in a world where when the future is unpredictable in principle, what do you think is best way, best practice, so to speak, to be adaptive in the long run, adaptive
Mm-hmm.
for the future?
Well, according to Alan Kay, that the predictable future is that something that if you can make future, then the future can be
Okay.
predictable. That's what Alan Kay said.
Yep.
But also, I think the chaos doesn't mean, unpredictable 100%. It's more like a unpredictability or uncertainty grows exponentially. So, but grows exponentially, but still they have some characteristic time scale, which
Yeah.
is the Lyapunov exponent, the recursive Lyapunov exponent. So, you know, uh, maybe you cannot predict the hundreds of years from now, but you can predict like 30 years from now, right? So, and then also the future, maybe you can create future, or also you can um well, of course I don't think you can control the future itself, but chaos itself is not something that we expect in the real world. I think the chaos in that sense is more like um non-living systems world, right? I mean, that's why that people say that chaos cannot explain simply what life is. In order to explain life, this chaos is not good enough, right? Maybe we have to add some other things. So this some other things that explains what is life is what I will have to learn, and that is what beyond the GAI, and then that's what I think you can explain what is life, and then that's how we
Yeah.
can go
Yeah.
to understand.
Twitter profile, Twitter account, ALLTBL,
Yes,
stands for artificial life larger than biological life, right?
yes.
Can you explain to the viewer what it means?
Well, yeah, because yeah, I explained many things, but right, I mean, many times. But when I was explaining the interesting phenomena from my computer, that people when I brought it to biologists, and biologists are all happy with my result. But finally, they say, okay, Takashi, when you come to the real world, and the real world is the real living system is much more interesting and more unpredictable than what you have in your computer. And then after several, the same experiences, I discussed, okay, maybe I don't have to mimic what happens in the real world. First of all, I have to, create artificial living systems first. Then, I mean, maybe the real life can be the part of, the artificial life. That's why I think artificial life is larger than biological life, and that's how I came out.
And do you believe in the same vein that artificial intelligence is larger than natural intelligence?
No. So you are so bright. Well, yeah, well, too. Um, but I think you have to do something extraordinary in an extreme way, and then that's exactly what I meant when I say artificial life is larger than biological life.
Right.
Is because really have to take on extreme directions of making some strange artificial intelligence. Then probably the shadow of this something strange artificial intelligence that you can understand what the biological intelligence is. So yeah, so I think it holds the same message.
So it's about a number, and this has been great. And I didn't really expect our conversation to go this way, but
Mhm.
probably just like large language models, it all depends on the initial condition, and
Right, right.
from there, our conversation have evolved into unpredictable things. So we should
Mhm.
probably do it again. So okay. Okay. So thank you, Takashi, for this really wonderful
No, no,
conversation.
no. I really thank you very much for very interesting interviews. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.